This story is a work of fiction. All characters, names, events, and situations portrayed in this video are purely imaginary. Any resemblance to actual persons living or dead, or to real events is purely coincidental. This content is created for entertainment purposes only. Millionaire's one night with an innocent maid turns to love, family, and a fight against leukemia. Part 1. Brittany Haley Samantha had exactly 3 thoughts in the following order. 1. She was going to lose her job. 2. That champagne probably cost more than her rent. 3. The most devastatingly handsome man she'd ever seen was currently staring at her like she'd just murdered his firstborn. "I am so sorry," she breathed, her hands hovering uselessly over the wreckage of what had been 30 seconds ago, a perfectly organized tray of vintage Dom Perignon. "I didn't see the rug edge, and I tripped, and—" "Stop!" The man's voice cut through her, rambling like a knife through butter. Deep, commanding, the kind of voice that probably made boardrooms fall silent and stock markets tremble. Mason Jacobs stood 6 feet 3 inches of tailored perfection in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Brittany made in 6 months. His dark hair was slightly disheveled in that deliberately casual way that screamed expensive stylist, and his gray eyes storm cloud gray, the kind of gray that made poets write terrible sonnets, were currently fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees wobble. Or maybe that was just the champagne soaking through her sensible flats. "I'll pay for it," Brittany said quickly, even though her mental calculator was already weeping at the impossibility. "I can do installments, monthly payments. I'll work extra shifts." "You're new?" It wasn't a question. "It's my 2nd day," Brittany admitted, her cheeks burning hot enough to fry an egg. "First day was orientation, so technically this is my first real day, and I'm already—" She gestured helplessly at the disaster zone surrounding her feet. "This." A muscle ticked in Mason's jaw. He pulled out his phone, and Brittany's heart sank into her champagne-soaked shoes. Here it came. The call to her supervisor, the termination, the humiliating escort out of the building while security watched and pitied her. She needed this job. Desperately. Her student loans weren't going to pay themselves, and her tiny studio apartment in Queens wasn't going to magically cover its own rent. She'd applied to 37 cleaning services before Lux Domestics had finally hired her, and now she was about to get fired because she couldn't walk in a straight line. "Zephyrine," Mason said into his phone, his eyes never leaving Brittany's face. "I need the housekeeping service to send someone up with cleaning supplies. Champagne spill in the main room." "No, don't call the supervisor. Just send supplies." "Because I said so, Zeph." "Thank you." He hung up. Brittany blinked. "You're not? Firing me?" "Firing me? I don't technically employ you," Mason said, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "Lux Domestics does, and I'm not calling them because—" He paused, and something almost resembling amusement flickered across his features. "It's Tuesday." "Tuesday," Brittany repeated slowly, as if the word might make more sense the second time. "I hate Tuesdays. They're arbitrary and annoying, and I refuse to make them worse by ruining someone's employment over an accident." He looked down at the mess, then back at her. "Though I'm curious how someone trips over a rug that's been in the same spot for 3 years. "I'm clumsy," Brittany said, then immediately regretted the admission. "I mean, not usually. Just when I'm nervous. And you have a very intimidating apartment." "Intimidating? It's very clean, and white, and expensive looking. Like a museum, or a hotel, Or a museum hotel hybrid where everything costs $1 million and you're not allowed to breathe wrong? The words tumbled out before she could stop them, and Brittany mentally added Motormouth to her growing list of professional failures. But Mason didn't look angry. If anything, the almost amusement had grown into something closer to actual amusement. A museum hotel hybrid. I didn't mean, Brittany started. It's accurate, Mason interrupted. My interior designer would be thrilled. That's exactly what she was going for. Modern minimalist luxury with a hospitality-forward sensibility. He said it in a slightly mocking tone that suggested he'd heard the phrase one too many times. She used the word sensibility 14 times during our consultation. Brittany felt her lips twitch despite her mortification. That sounds sensible. Mason's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile if it had tried a little harder. You're either very brave or very stupid to make jokes right now. Definitely stupid, Brittany said. I just destroyed your champagne collection while wearing shoes that squeak when I walk. I'm basically a walking disaster. The shoes do squeak, Mason agreed, and this time the smile actually committed. It transformed his entire face, softening the sharp angles and making him look less like a ruthless business tycoon and more like a person. A devastatingly attractive person who probably had a waiting list of women hoping to see that exact smile. Brittany's heart did a traitorous little flip. Stop it, she told her heart firmly. He's a client. A rich, powerful client who lives in a museum hotel and probably dates supermodels. You are the clumsy maid who just destroyed his champagne. This is not a romance novel. I'll clean this up, she said, kneeling down carefully and starting to gather the larger glass shards. And I promise I'll be more careful for the rest of my shift. No more disasters. I'll be invisible, silent. You won't even know I'm... Ow! Blood welled up from her index finger, where a particularly sharp piece of glass had sliced through the skin. Christ, Mason muttered. And suddenly, he was kneeling beside her, his hand wrapping around her wrist. His fingers were warm and firm, and Brittany's brain temporarily short-circuited at the proximity. He smelled like expensive cologne and something else, cedar, maybe, or sandalwood, and she could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. I'm fine, she managed, even though her finger was definitely bleeding and her brain was definitely malfunctioning. You're dripping blood on my marble, Mason said dryly, but his touch was gentle as he examined the cut. Stay here. Don't touch anything else. I'm going to get the first aid kit before you accidentally amputate something. He stood and strode toward what Brittany assumed was the bathroom, leaving her kneeling in champagne and wondering if it was possible to die of embarrassment. Because if it was, she was definitely halfway there. This is humiliating, Brittany said for the third time, as Mason carefully cleaned the cut on her finger. You've mentioned, Mason replied, his focus entirely on the task at hand. His fingers were surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he'd never done manual labor in his life. I'm supposed to be cleaning your apartment, not bleeding all over it while you play doctor. I'm not playing doctor. I'm applying basic first aid so you don't sue me for unsafe working conditions. I would never sue you. Mason glanced up, one eyebrow raised. You've been here for 20 minutes, and you've already destroyed several $1,000s worth of champagne and injured yourself on the wreckage. Forgive me for being cautious. Brittany's eyes widened. Several thousand. I thought maybe a few hundred. The 2008 Dom Perignon Rosé runs about $900 per bottle. You destroyed 4 bottles, plus 2 standard Dom Perignon at around $200 each. He said it matter-of-factly, as if he were reciting grocery prices. But don't worry about it. I have insurance. For champagne? For everything. He applied antiseptic to the cut, and Brittany hissed at the sting. Sorry. Almost.
If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more amazing love stories. All right, back to the story.
Almost done. Do you have insurance for traumatized maids? That's called workers' compensation. Mason wrapped a Band-Aid around her finger with surprising precision. There. Try not to lose any other body parts before your shift ends. No promises, Brittany said. I once gave myself a black eye trying to open a pickle jar. Mason's lips twitched. How? The lid was really stuck, and I was using a butter knife for leverage, and it slipped. And she mimed the catastrophic trajectory. Boom. Black eye. My roommate thought I'd gotten into a fight. With a pickle jar. It was a very aggressive pickle jar. This time Mason actually laughed a real laugh. Not just a smile, and the sound did something dangerous to Brittany's cardiovascular system. It was warm and genuine and completely unexpected. And she found herself smiling back, despite the throbbing in her finger and the disaster in the living room. You're an unusual person, Brittany Haley Samantha, Mason said. And the way he said her full name carefully, like he was tasting each syllable, made her stomach flip. How did you know my full name? It's on your badge. He gestured to the ID clipped to her uniform. Also, it's a very long name. My mom couldn't decide, Brittany explained. Brittany was her grandmother's name, Haley was her best friend's name, and Samantha was from her favorite TV show. So she just used all three. Efficient. Indecisive, Brittany corrected. But I like it. Makes me sound fancy. Like I should have a hyphen and a British accent. Do you have a British accent? No, but I do a terrible impression of one, she demonstrated. And it was indeed terrible. A weird mix of Cockney and what might have been Australian. See, completely useless. Mason shook his head, still smiling. I'm starting to think you're a professional chaos agent. Only semi-professional, Brittany said. I don't get paid enough to be fully professional. A knock on the door interrupted them, and a tall woman with striking silver hair and sharp cheekbones entered carrying cleaning supplies. She looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, elegant and poised in a way that made Brittany feel even more like a disaster. Mr. Jacob, the woman said, her accent vaguely European. Your cleaning supplies. Shall I take care of the spill? No, thank you, Zephyrine. Just leave them. Mason stood, and Brittany scrambled to her feet. Brittany will handle it once her finger stops trying to stage a rebellion. Zephyrine's dark eyes flicked to Brittany's band-aided finger, then to Brittany's face, and something calculating passed through her expression. Of course. Will there be anything else? That's all. Thank you. Zephyrine nodded and left. But not before giving Brittany one more assessing look that made her feel like a bug under a microscope. She seems nice, Brittany said weakly. Zephyrin runs the building management. She's extremely efficient and slightly terrifying. Mason handed Brittany the cleaning supplies. Think you can manage without any more injuries? I'll do my best, Brittany promised. Though I make no guarantees about the champagne. If any of it has developed sentience and decided to attack me, I'm out. Sentient champagne, Mason repeated. That would certainly be an insurance claim. Brittany grinned. See? You're prepared for everything. 2 hours later, the champagne disaster had been completely erased, and Brittany had successfully cleaned the rest of the penthouse without any additional catastrophes. She was rather proud of herself. She was gathering her supplies when Mason's voice stopped her. Brittany, she turned. He was still at his desk, but his laptop was closed now, and he was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Yes, Mr. Jacob. Mason, he corrected. Mr. Jacob is my father, and he's an asshole. Brittany blinked at the unexpected candor. Oh, okay. Mason, you did a good job. The place looks... He glanced around as if searching for the right word. Lived in. Less like a museum hotel hybrid. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. He stood, walking over to where she stood by the door. Up close, she was reminded again of how tall he was, how his presence seemed to fill the space. I want to apologize. For what? For being short with you earlier. I was on an important call when you arrived. And I was. He paused, stressed. But that's not your fault. And you didn't deserve to be on the receiving end of my bad mood. Brittany felt warmth bloom in her chest. You weren't that bad. I mean, I did destroy your champagne collection. You could have been much worse. Still, I pride myself on being professional, and I wasn't. He pulled out his wallet, extracting several bills. For your trouble, and your finger. Brittany stared at the money. It was at least $300. I can't accept that. I was just doing my job. Well, attempting to do my job between disasters. Consider it hazard pay. But, Brittany, the way he said her name made her arguments dissolve on her tongue. Take it. Please. It'll make me feel less like an asshole. And apparently I'm trying to differentiate myself from my father. She took the money carefully, still feeling like she was in some alternate reality where handsome millionaires apologized to clumsy maids and handed out $100 bills like candy. Thank you. This is really generous. It's practical, Mason corrected, but there was something softer in his expression. Same time next week? You want me to come back? Brittany couldn't keep the surprise out of her voice. Why wouldn't I? Because I destroyed your champagne and bled on your marble and made you administer first aid when you probably have very important millionaire things to do? Mason's lips curved into that almost smile that did dangerous things to her pulse. All true. But you also made me laugh on a Tuesday, which is no small feat. And you do good work when you're not staging disasters. He paused. Plus, I'm curious to see what you'll destroy next week. Nothing, Brittany said firmly. Next week, I'll be perfectly professional, invisible, silent, no disasters whatsoever. We'll see. Mason opened the door for her. Have a good evening, Brittany, Haley, Samantha. You too, Mason Jacob. She stepped into the hallway, her heart still racing, the cash warm in her pocket and her band-aided finger throbbing with each heartbeat. As the door closed behind her, she allowed herself one small, giddy smile. Then she caught her reflection in the mirrored elevator doors and groaned. She had champagne stains on her uniform, her hair had escaped its ponytail, and there was what appeared to be a smudge of something blood. Glass cleaner? On her cheek. She looked like exactly what she was. A disaster. And somehow, impossibly, Mason Jacob wanted her to come back next week. Brittany pressed the elevator button, still smiling like an idiot, and tried very hard not to think about storm gray eyes and unexpected kindness and the way her name sounded in that deep, commanding voice. She failed spectacularly. As the elevator descended, Brittany pulled out her phone and texted her roommate. You will not believe what just happened at work. Champagne disaster, blood, band-aids, and the most beautiful man I've ever seen. Is it possible to fall for someone after one conversation? Asking for a friend. A very clumsy friend. Dearest viewers, what did you think of this meet cute? Have you ever had a first day at work that went this disastrously wrong? Let me know in the comments. So let me get this straight, O'Shan said, pointing a spoonful of cereal at Brittany like a weapon. You destroyed $4,000 worth of champagne, injured yourself, got bandaged up by a literal millionaire, and he tipped you $300 and asked you to come back? That's the summary, yes. Brittany was attempting to fix the broken zipper on her work bag with a safety pin, and failing miserably. Her fingers were not cooperating this morning, probably because one of them was still wrapped in Mason Jacobs' carefully applied Band-Aid. She definitely hadn't stared at that Band-Aid for 20 minutes last night before bed. That would be pathetic. Girl. O'Shan set down her cereal bowl with dramatic flair. That's not a work interaction. That's a meet cute. It's not a meet cute. It's a professional disaster, followed by basic human kindness. Basic human kindness doesn't come with $300 and a request for you to return. He probably feels sorry for me, Brittany said, finally getting the safety pin to cooperate. I'm like a sad puppy who keeps walking into walls. People naturally want to help. O'Shan snorted. She was studying theater at NYU and had the dramatic sensibilities to prove it. Her current look involved purple braids, a vintage band t-shirt, and pajama pants covered in tiny Shakespeare quotes. Brit, honey, love of my life, you are many things, but sad puppy is not one of them. You're smart, funny, and cute in that girl next door way that drives rich guys crazy. I am not cute. I'm a 23-year-old grad student who can't afford real furniture and eats ramen 4 times a week. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. O'Shan leaned forward conspiratorially. Did he ask about your personal life? Your interests? Whether you're seeing anyone? No, because it was a professional interaction. But even as she said it, Brittany remembered the way Mason had laughed at her pickle jar story, the gentle way he'd bandaged her finger, the softness in his eyes when he'd asked her to come back. Stop it, she told her traitorous brain. He was being nice. Rich people are allowed to be nice sometimes. What does he look like? O'Shan demanded. Tall, dark hair, gray eyes. Brittany tried to sound casual and failed. Nice bone structure. Nice bone structure? What are you, a museum curator? Fine. He's gorgeous. Happy? He looks like someone sculpted him from marble and then brought him to life and dressed him in expensive suits. Brittany threw a pillow at O'Shan, but it doesn't matter because he's a client and I'm his maid, and that's a power dynamic nightmare waiting to happen. Or, O'Shan said, catching the pillow, it's the beginning of a beautiful romance. This is real life, not one of your theater productions. Real life can have romance too, Britt. You're allowed to have nice things happen to you. Brittany felt something twist in her chest. O'Shan knew about her childhood, about the string of foster homes, the constant moving, the feeling of never quite belonging anywhere. Brittany had learned early that nice things were temporary, and hoping for them only led to disappointment. I need this job, she said quietly. I can't afford to mess it up by developing a crush on a client. Who said anything about messing it up? O'Shan's voice gentled. I'm just saying, be open to possibilities. You've been so focused on surviving school, work, bills, that you've forgotten how to actually live. Deep thoughts. Before 8 a.m. Very philosophical of you. I'm a woman of many talents. O'Shan checked her phone and swore. Shit. I have rehearsal in 40 minutes. But Britt, promise me you'll at least consider that. Maybe, possibly. The universe is throwing you a bone here. The universe threw me a champagne disaster. Potato, potato. O'Shan grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Text me after your shift today. I want updates, full reports, spare no details. There won't be any details. Today I'm going to be perfectly boring and professional. Sure you are, O'Shan called over her shoulder. And I'm going to win a Tony before I'm 30. The door closed, and Brittany was left alone with her thoughts and her safety-pinned bag and the faint memory of storm-gray eyes. Mason Jacob had not thought about the champagne incident in at least 12 hours. This was a lie. He'd thought about it approximately 47 times, which he knew because he'd been counting in a fit of self-awareness that was both annoying and concerning. He didn't get distracted. Distraction was for people who lacked discipline and focus, and Mason had built a multi-million-dollar investment firm on the foundation of both. At 32, he was one of the youngest managing partners at Apex Capital, and he'd gotten there by being ruthless, strategic, and completely immune to anything that didn't directly contribute to his bottom line. He did not think about clumsy maids with warm brown eyes and terrible British accents. Except apparently he did. "You're scowling at that report like it personally offended you," said a voice from the doorway. Mason looked up to find Kayla Moreau leaning against the frame, coffee in hand. She was his business partner and closest friend, a title she'd claimed through sheer persistence and the fact that she was the only person who could match his work ethic and tolerate his moods. "The Henderson merger numbers don't add up," Mason said, gesturing at his screen. "Someone's being creative with their accounting. Creative or criminal? The line is blurry." Kayla walked in and settled into the chair across from his desk. She was wearing one of her signature power suits, this one navy with subtle pinstripes, and her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun that somehow made her look more intimidating. Pull out or renegotiate? Renegotiate. The underlying assets are solid. They're just trying to inflate the valuation. Typical. Kayla sipped her coffee, her sharp green eyes studying him over the rim. "You seem distracted." "I'm not distracted. You've been staring at that same page for 15 minutes. I timed it." Mason closed his laptop with more force than necessary. "I'm fine." "Uh-huh." Kayla's expression shifted into something that might have been amusement on a less terrifying person. "Does this have anything to do with the champagne disaster Zephyrin told me about?" "Zephyrin needs to learn discretion." "Zephyrin has perfect discretion. She just doesn't apply it to me because I'm scary and persistent." Kayla leaned forward. "So, a maid destroyed your expensive champagne, injured herself, and you personally administered first aid and gave her a $300 tip? How did you never mind?" "Yes, all of that is accurate. That's very unlike you. She was hurt. I have first aid training. It was the logical thing to do. The logical thing would have been to call building management and have them handle it. I don't like her. I met her for 30 minutes, long enough to learn she's clumsy, has a sense of humor, and makes you laugh on Tuesdays." Mason glared. "I'm going to fire Zephyrin." "No, you won't. She's the best building manager in Manhattan, and you hate dealing with maintenance issues." Kayla set down her coffee. "Mason, you haven't shown interest in anyone since Vivienne. And that was 2 years ago. Don't say her name. Vivienne? Vivienne? Vivienne?" Kayla said deliberately, and Mason fought the urge to throw something at her. "She's married now, by the way, to that investment banker. I saw the announcement in the Times. Good for her. You don't care? Why would I care? We were incompatible. The relationship ended. I moved on." It was the same speech he'd given himself for 2 years, and it still felt like swallowing glass. Vivian Ashcroft had been everything he thought he wanted. Sophisticated, ambitious, from the right family. They dated for 18 months, and he'd been planning to propose when she'd sat him down and explained, very calmly, that she was leaving him for someone who actually had emotions. "You're like a beautiful robot," she'd said. "Efficient and impressive, and completely empty inside." It had stung. Mostly because it was true. "You know what your problem is?" Kayla said, interrupting his thoughts. "I have a feeling you're going to tell me. You're afraid of being human." She said it matter-of-factly, as if she were discussing stock prices. You've built these walls so high that nobody can get in, and you've convinced yourself that's strength. But it's not. It's just lonely. Thank you, Dr. Phil. I'm serious, Mason. You're allowed to like someone. You're allowed to be interested. You're allowed to, God forbid, be a little messy sometimes. I don't do messy, which is why you need someone who does. Kalith stood, smoothing her suit. At least consider the possibility that the universe is trying to tell you something. A beautiful disaster literally fell into your lap. Maybe that's not an accident. You sound like a fortune cookie. I prefer wise mentor figure. She headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Zephyrin said the maid seemed sweet. And you smiled more in that 30-minute interaction than you have in the last 6 months combined. Zephyrin is fired. Sure she is. Kalith left, and Mason was alone with his thoughts and the Henderson merger, and the persistent, annoying memory of warm brown eyes and a terrible British accent. He opened his laptop, closed it, opened it again. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. Brittany's week. Monday, Brittany cleaned 3 apartments and attended 2 graduate lectures on social psychology. She took notes diligently and tried not to think about Mason Jacob. She failed. Tuesday, she worked a morning shift at a law office downtown and spent her lunch break in Central Park, eating a sad sandwich and wondering if Mason was having a good Tuesday. Then she felt ridiculous for wondering. Wednesday, her professor praised her thesis proposal on attachment theory in foster care systems, and Brittany felt proud for exactly 15 minutes before remembering she still had 2 more years of school and approximately $60,000 in student loans. Thursday, she cleaned for a sweet elderly woman named Thessaly, who made her tea and told her stories about her late husband. Love finds you when you're not looking, Thessaly said, patting Brittany's hand. It sneaks up and surprises you. Brittany thought about champagne disasters and Band-Aids and tried not to read too much into coincidences. Friday, Oshan dragged her to a terrible off-Broadway show that was 3 hours long and made 0 sense. Afterward, they got pizza, and Oshan complained about her scene partner, who couldn't find his motivation with a GPS and a map. "How's Mr. Millionaire?" Oshan asked through a mouthful of pepperoni. "I don't know. I haven't seen him since last week." "But you've thought about him." "No," Brittany lied. "Liar. I don't have a dreamy, stupid face. You absolutely do. You're making it right now." Saturday and Sunday, Brittany studied, worked, and tried to convince herself that Tuesday was just another day and Mason Jacob was just another client, and she definitely wasn't counting down the hours until she saw him again. She was counting down the hours. Mason's week. Monday, Mason closed the Henderson merger after discovering the accounting irregularities and using them as leverage for better terms. It was satisfying in the way winning always was clean, efficient, profitable. Tuesday, he went to the gym at 5 a.m., worked until 8 p.m., and came home to his pristine, empty penthouse. It looked exactly the same as it had before the champagne disaster, but somehow it felt different. Emptier. He hated Tuesdays. Wednesday, Kalith caught him spacing out during a meeting and kicked him under the table. "Focus," she mouthed. He focused. Mostly. Thursday, his father called to criticize his investment strategy and remind him that Jacob men don't do emotions, we do results. Mason agreed politely and hung up feeling vaguely nauseous. Friday, he had dinner with some college friends, Rydian, who worked in tech, and Summerald, who'd inherited his family's real estate empire. They talked about business and women and scotch, and Mason pretended to be interested while thinking about warm brown eyes and terrible accents. "You're distracted," Rydian observed. "I'm fine. He's always fine," Summerald said. "Mason doesn't do not fine." It's against his religion. Mason changed the subject. Saturday, he worked. Sunday, he worked more. He told himself he was catching up on quarterly reports. Really, he was just trying to make the weekend pass faster. Monday night, he stood in his penthouse living room, the exact spot where Brittany had destroyed his champagne, and smiled at nothing. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. Brittany arrived at Mason's building at 3 p.m. on Tuesday, with sweaty palms and a determination to be perfectly professional. No disasters, no blood, no making Mason laugh, or noticing his bone structure, or developing inappropriate feelings. Just cleaning. Professional, boring, invisible cleaning. "Miss Samantha," Zephyrine said when Brittany signed in at the front desk. The building manager looked her up and down with those calculating dark eyes. "Mr. Jacob mentioned you'd be returning." "He did?" He was quite specific about it. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Zephyrine severe features. "Try not to destroy anything expensive today." "That's the plan," Brittany said weakly. She took the elevator up to the penthouse, her heart doing increasingly complicated gymnastics routines. This was ridiculous. He was just a client, a handsome, kind, funny client who had bandaged her finger and asked her to come back, but still, just a client. The elevator doors opened. Mason was standing in the living room, laptop open on the coffee table, wearing jeans and a dark blue Henley that should have been illegal. He looked up when she entered, and something warm flashed across his face before settling into professional neutrality. "Brittany." "Right on time." "I'm very punctual," Brittany said, then winced. "When I'm not destroying things. How's the finger?" She held up her hand, now Band-Aid free, fully healed, ready to clean without any bloodshed. "Ambitious." Mason closed his laptop. "I should warn you, I'm working from home today. I'll be in my office if you need anything. Try to ignore me. I'm very good at ignoring people." This was a lie. Brittany had never successfully ignored anyone in her life. She once spent an entire movie distracted by someone coughing 3 rows back. Good. But Mason was smiling that small, almost smile that did illegal things to her pulse, and Brittany knew she was in trouble. This was going to be a very long afternoon. The thing about cleaning someone's home, Brittany discovered, was that you learned a lot about them. Mason's penthouse was immaculate, but it was also revealing in small ways. There were business books on the shelves, but also fiction, literary novels, and sci-fi, and one very worn copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. His kitchen was barely used, but the coffee maker was expensive and well-maintained. He had art on the walls, modern and abstract, but there was also one photograph, a candid shot of Mason with 2 other people, all of them laughing, taken somewhere sunny and warm. He had a life, friends, history. He wasn't just the intimidating millionaire in the expensive suit. "You're very thorough," Mason said, and Brittany jumped, nearly dropping the picture frame she'd been dusting. He was leaning against the door frame of his office, arms crossed, watching her with an expression that was equal parts amused and curious. "I didn't hear you," Brittany said, setting the frame down carefully. "Do you have, like, ninja training?" "Just quiet feet." He walked into the living room. "Can I get you something to drink? Water? Coffee?" "I'm fine, thank you." "I don't want to interrupt your work." "You're not interrupting." "I needed a break anyway. I've been staring at the same spreadsheet for an hour." He moved to the kitchen, and Brittany found herself following despite her better judgment. "What kind of work do you do?" she asked, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry. That's probably too personal." "I shouldn't. It's fine. I run an investment firm, Apex Capital. We manage portfolios for high net worth individuals and do some venture capital work." That sounds complicated. It is. But it's satisfying. Like solving puzzles where the answer is money. He poured himself a glass of water. What about you? Are you in school? Brittany blinked. How did you know? Lucky guess. You have that perpetually exhausted grad student look. Wow. That's both accurate and devastating. But she was smiling. I'm getting my master's in social work at NYU. I want to work with kids in foster care. Something shifted in Mason's expression. A softness, maybe, or understanding. That's admirable. It's personal, Brittany admitted before she could stop herself. I grew up in foster care. 7 different homes between ages 6 and 18. Some were good, some were less good. I want to help make the system better. Mason was quiet for a moment, and Brittany worried she'd overshared. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle. That's why you're working 3 jobs while getting your master's degree. No family support. No family at all, really. But that's fine. I've got O'Shan, my roommate, and I've got plans, and I've got... She gestured at her cleaning supplies. This glamorous career in housekeeping. There's nothing wrong with honest work. I know. I just didn't expect to be having philosophical conversations with my clients about it. Maybe I'm not like most clients. Mason's gray eyes held hers, and Brittany felt the air between them shift into something charged and complicated. Maybe not, she said quietly. The moment stretched, fragile and shimmering, until Mason's phone buzzed violently against the counter. He glanced at it and sighed. I need to take this. Financial emergency. Someone's portfolio is apparently on fire. Metaphorically? Unfortunately, yes. Literal fire would be easier to fix. He headed back to his office, then paused. Brittany, I'm glad you came back. He disappeared into his office before she could respond, leaving her standing in his kitchen with cleaning supplies and a heart that was beating entirely too fast. Professional, she reminded herself. This is professional, but it was starting to feel like something else entirely. Brittany was supposed to leave at 6 p.m. At 5:47, the sky opened up and decided to drown New York City. She stood at Mason's floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the rain come down in sheets so thick she could barely see the buildings across the street. Lightning forked across the sky, and thunder rolled through the penthouse loud enough to rattle the glass. That's biblical, Mason said behind her, and she turned to find him standing there with 2 mugs of tea. Thought you might want something warm before you brave the apocalypse. You made me tea? I'm capable of basic hospitality. He handed her a mug Earl Grey, perfectly steeped. Though I should warn you, I'm working off a YouTube tutorial. If it tastes terrible, blame the internet. Brittany sipped carefully. It was actually perfect. This is really good. Don't sound so surprised. But he was smiling. That small smile that she'd started cataloging in her mind against her better judgment. You should probably wait out the worst of the storm. The subway's going to be a nightmare. And you'll get soaked trying to get there. I don't want to intrude. Brittany. Mason set his own mug down on the coffee table. You're not intruding. I'm offering. There's a difference. Thunder crashed again, making the decision for her. Okay. Thank you. I'll just wait here. Quietly. You won't even know I'm here. I seriously doubt that. Before Brittany could ask what he meant, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. I need to take this. Make yourself comfortable. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry. He disappeared into his office, and Brittany was left alone with her tea and the storm, and the growing realization that being alone with Mason Jacob in his penthouse during a thunderstorm felt dangerously intimate. She settled onto the edge of his very expensive couch and tried not to touch anything. 20 minutes later, Mason emerged from his office looking like he'd aged 5 years. Everything okay? Brittany asked, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, not my business. It's fine. Mason ran a hand through his hair, destroying its careful styling. My father, he's difficult. The asshole father you mentioned? The very same. Mason walked to the windows, staring out at the storm. He thinks my investment strategy is too conservative, says I'm wasting the Jacob name on safe bets and cautious returns. He wants me to take bigger risks, make flashier deals. His jaw tightened. He doesn't understand that I built Apex specifically to not be like his firm. I don't want to gamble with people's life savings. I don't want to prioritize profit over ethics. Brittany set down her tea and moved closer, drawn by something in his voice, a vulnerability she hadn't heard before. Sounds like you and your father have very different values. That's a diplomatic way of putting it. Mason turned to look at her. He's a corporate raider. He buys struggling companies, strips them for parts, and destroys people's livelihoods for profit. He's brilliant and ruthless and completely without conscience. He paused. And he spent my entire life trying to mold me into his image. But you didn't let him. No, I didn't. But some days, Mason's voice trailed off, and Brittany saw something raw in his expression. Some days I wonder if he's right, if being ethical makes me weak, if caring about the consequences of my decisions makes me less successful. It doesn't, Brittany said firmly. It makes you human. And that's not a weakness, it's literally the most important thing. Mason looked at her for a long moment, and Brittany felt the air between them shift again into that charged, complicated space. You really believe that? Of course I do. I've seen what happens when people prioritize profit over people. The foster care system is full of kids whose parents chose drugs, or money, or their own needs over their children. The system itself is underfunded and broken because nobody wants to invest in unprofitable programs. She stepped closer. What you're doing, building something ethical, refusing to be like your father, that takes more strength than just following the easy, profitable path. It doesn't feel strong. It feels like swimming upstream while everyone else goes with the current. That's because it is swimming upstream. But that doesn't make it wrong. Thunder rumbled, softer now as the storm began to move past. Mason was still watching her with that intense gray gaze that made her heart do acrobatics. You're a very unusual person, Brittany Haley Samantha, he said quietly. You've mentioned that before. I'm starting to think it might be my favorite thing about you. Brittany's breath caught. Mason. His phone rang again, shattering the moment. He swore softly and checked the screen. It's Caliph. I need to. Take it. I'm fine. Brittany stepped back, trying to calm her racing pulse. Mason answered. Kai, what's wrong? What? Are you serious? When? No. Don't do anything. I'll handle it. He hung up, his expression shifting from vulnerable to coldly professional in seconds. I have to go. Now? In the storm? Now. There's a situation at the office. One of our clients is threatening to pull their entire portfolio because they heard a rumor about the Henderson merger. He was already moving, grabbing his jacket and keys. I need to handle this in person before it spirals. Is there anything I can do? Mason paused, looking at her. You've already done more than you know. What? Come with me. The office is only 15 minutes away, and I can drop you home after. It's better than you trying to navigate the subway in this weather. Mason, I'm your maid. I can't just show up at your office. You're not my maid. You're... He stopped, and something vulnerable crossed his features again. You're someone whose company I enjoy, and I'd like you to come with me. Please. Brittany knew she should say no. Knew this was crossing about 17 professional boundaries. New Ocean would call this a terrible idea or a perfect meet-cute, depending on her mood. Okay, she said. Let's go. Mason's car was exactly what Brittany expected. A sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than she'd make in 10 years. The interior smelled like leather and that cedar sandalwood scent that she'd started to associate with him. This is a very nice car, she said, because apparently her brain had decided to state the obvious when nervous. It's practical. Mason navigated through the rain-slicked streets with the kind of confidence that came from years of city driving. Good safety ratings, reliable, efficient. Also probably very expensive. Also that. He glanced at her, some of the tension easing from his features. You can say I'm rich, Brittany. It's not a secret. I know. It's just weird. I've never really known anyone wealthy before. Everyone I know is either broke or one medical emergency away from broke. Is that why you're working 3 jobs? While getting your degree? 3 jobs, student loans that would make you cry, and absolutely no safety net. She said it matter-of-factly, not looking for pity. But I'm making it work. I'll graduate, get a good job in social services, and spend the rest of my life paying off debt while helping kids. It's not glamorous, but it's what I want. Mason was quiet for a moment. My father once told me that anyone who works hourly is lazy and lacks ambition. That if they were smart or motivated, they'd find a way to build wealth. Your father sounds like he's never experienced actual poverty. He hasn't. Neither have I, for that matter. Mason pulled up to a red light, the rain still drumming against the windshield. I grew up with every advantage. Private schools, Ivy League education, a trust fund that made sure I'd never worry about money. The firm I built? I started it with family money and connections. You sound guilty about that. Shouldn't I be? I've never struggled, never worried about rent or loans or whether I could afford to eat. Everything I have is built on privilege I didn't earn. Brittany turned to look at him fully. Mason, having privilege doesn't make you a bad person. It's what you do with that privilege that matters. And from what I can tell, you're using yours to build something ethical and help people manage their money responsibly. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing when I talk to you about your life. 3 jobs, foster care, fighting for every single thing you have. Different struggles don't make one person better than another, Brittany said gently. You're fighting your father's expectations and trying to build something meaningful. I'm fighting poverty and trying to help kids. We're both just trying to be good people in the ways we can. Mason looked at her, and something in his expression made Brittany's heart squeeze. How are you so wise? Foster care teaches you a lot about people. You learn to read them, understand them, survive them. She smiled. Plus, I'm getting a master's in psychology. Professional wisdom is kind of my thing. The light turned green, and Mason drove on. But Brittany noticed his hand on the gear shift was closer to her now, like he'd unconsciously moved it in her direction. Can I ask you something? Mason said after a moment. Sure. Why do you still come back? To clean my apartment, I mean. You could probably find easier clients. Less champagne disasters. Brittany's pulse quickened. Honestly, always. Because you're the first client who's ever treated me like a person instead of just hired help. Because you bandaged my finger and made me tea and asked about my life. Because you make me laugh on Tuesdays. She took a breath. And because when I'm around you, I feel like I'm not just surviving. Like maybe I could actually have something good. Mason's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Brittany, it's okay. I know this is probably inappropriate. Client boundaries and power dynamics and all that. I'm not expecting anything. She looked out the window. I wanted to be honest. They pulled up to a tall glass building in Midtown, and Mason put the car in park, but he didn't move to get out. Instead, he turned to face her fully. "You want to know why I asked you to come back?" His voice was rough, intense. "It wasn't because you're good at cleaning. It's because in 30 minutes, you made me laugh more than I have in years. Because you're real and funny and kind. And when you're around, my apartment doesn't feel like a museum. It feels like a home." Brittany couldn't breathe. "Mason, I know this is complicated. I know there are boundaries and ethical considerations and about 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea." He reached out, and his fingers brushed her hand, just a whisper of contact that sent electricity racing up her arm. "But I like you. More than I should. More than is probably wise. And I don't know what to do about it." "I like you too," Brittany whispered. "So much it scares me." They stared at each other in the rain-dimmed car, the air between them crackling with possibility and want and fear. Then Mason's phone buzzed again, Caleth's name flashing on the screen, and reality crashed back in. "I have to go handle this," Mason said, but he sounded reluctant. "I know. Will you wait? In the car?" "I shouldn't be more than an hour." "Mason, you don't have to. Please. I want to make sure you get home safely. And," he paused, "I'm not ready for this conversation to be over." Brittany's heart was doing full Olympic routines now. "Okay. I'll wait." Mason smiled, a real, full smile that transformed his entire face, and then he was gone, sprinting through the rain toward the building entrance. Brittany sat in his expensive car, surrounded by the scent of cedar and sandalwood, and tried to process what had just happened. He liked her. Mason Jacob, millionaire, investor with perfect bone structure and storm gray eyes, liked her. This was either the best thing that had ever happened to her, or it was about to become spectacularly complicated. Possibly both. She pulled out her phone and texted O'Shan. "Emergency. He likes me. I like him. We're both idiots. Send help." O'Shan's response was immediate. "Girl, this is the best news. Do not panic. Just breathe and be yourself. Then, also get details. All the details. I want a PLAYBYPLAY." Brittany smiled despite her nerves and settled in to wait, watching the rain stream down the windows and trying not to think about how everything had just changed. Mason slid back into the driver's seat, looking like he'd fought a small war and barely won. "Everything okay?" Brittany asked, putting her phone away. "Crisis averted. The rumor was completely fabricated by a competitor trying to poach our client. Caleth's already working on figuring out who started it." He loosened his tie completely and tossed it into the back seat. "Thank you for waiting. I wasn't going anywhere." Brittany tried not to notice how the streetlights cast shadows across his face, or how the slightly disheveled look made him even more attractive. "Besides, I've been having a very entertaining text conversation with my roommate about my life choices." "Good entertaining or bad entertaining?" She used the phrase, "living your best Cinderella fantasy," followed by 17 princess emojis. "So, you tell me." Mason's laugh was tired but genuine. "Cinderella. That's one way to look at it. Except in my version, I destroy the prince's champagne and bleed on his marble floors. And the prince is emotionally repressed and has daddy issues." "Oh, we're acknowledging the daddy issues now?" Seemed relevant after that phone call. Mason started the car, pulling back into the rain-slicked streets. "Where do you live?" "Queens, Astoria. But honestly, you can just drop me at the nearest subway." "Brittany, I'm driving you home. It's not up for debate." Something warm bloomed in her chest. "Bossy, practical," Mason corrected. But he was smiling. She did, and they drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the city lights blurring past in streaks of gold and red. Brittany found herself studying Mason's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair had fallen across his forehead, the small crease between his eyebrows that suggested he was thinking hard about something. "Can I ask you something?" Mason said suddenly. "As long as it's not about my terrible British accent." "It's about earlier, in the car." Brittany's heart rate immediately increased. "What about it? I need to know I didn't make you uncomfortable. I'm technically your employer indirectly, but still, and I don't want you to feel pressured or obligated or—" "Mason," she interrupted his spiraling. "You didn't make me uncomfortable. You made me hopeful, which is scary in its own way, but it's not uncomfortable." He glanced at her quickly before returning his eyes to the road. "Hopeful? I've spent most of my life expecting good things to be temporary, waiting for the other shoe to drop, learning not to get attached because everything ends eventually." She picked at a loose thread on her uniform. "But when you said you liked me, for a minute, I let myself imagine what it would be like if something actually worked out." Mason was quiet for a long moment. "I understand that. More than you might think. Because of your ex? Vivienne?" He shot her a surprised look. "How did you mentioned her name once, when you talked about moving on." Brittany bit her lip. "I wasn't snooping. It just stuck." Vivienne was. Mason's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "She was everything I thought I was supposed to want. Right background, right education, right career. We made sense on paper, but in reality, we were completely wrong for each other." "What happened?" "She told me I was emotionally unavailable. A beautiful robot who couldn't access feelings beyond ambition and control." He said it flatly, but Brittany heard the hurt underneath. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent so long trying to be the opposite of my father, controlled where he was volatile, strategic where he was impulsive, that I forgot how to actually feel things. "That's not true," Brittany said softly. "You feel things. I've seen it. When you talk about your work, your ethics, your frustration with your father, you're not a robot, Mason. You're just careful. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes. Being careful means you've been hurt before, and you're protecting yourself. Being a robot means you don't have feelings to protect in the first place." She shifted in her seat to face him more fully. "You bandaged my finger even though you didn't have to. You made me tea during a storm. You admitted you liked me even though it scared you. Those aren't robot behaviors." Mason pulled up to a red light and turned to look at her. "Really look at her. You see things in me that nobody else does. Maybe everyone else isn't looking hard enough." The light turned green, but Mason held her gaze for one more heartbeat before driving on. "What are we doing, Brittany?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I don't want to stop." "Neither do I." He took a breath. "But we need to be smart about this. There are complications, your job, the power dynamic, the fact that we barely know each other. So, we get to know each other. Slowly, carefully." Brittany's pulse was racing, but her voice was steady. No pressure, no expectations, just seeing where this goes. "Like dating? Like dating. If you want to. If you're interested in dating someone who destroys expensive champagne and has student loans that could finance a small country." Mason's mouth curved into that smile she was quickly becoming addicted to. "I think I can handle the champagne destruction. The student loans might require some creative portfolio management." Was that a rich person joke? Possibly. They pulled up to Brittany's building, a weathered brownstone that had seen better decades. She felt suddenly self-conscious about the peeling paint and the broken intercom and the way her entire building could probably fit inside Mason's penthouse. "This is me," she said unnecessarily. "It's charming. It's a dump. But it's my dump. And the rent is almost affordable." She unbuckled her seatbelt, but didn't move to leave. "Thank you. For the ride. And the tea. And everything, Brittany." Mason reached out and took her hand properly this time, his fingers lacing through hers. His palm was warm, and Brittany's breath caught at the contact. "I'd like to take you to dinner. An actual date. Not as your employer or client, just as me. Would you be interested?" "Yes," she said immediately. "Very interested. Friday? I know a place. Nothing too fancy. I don't want to intimidate you with my museum hotel tendencies." She laughed, feeling giddy and nervous and excited all at once. "Friday's perfect." Mason lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and unexpectedly romantic that Brittany's heart completely melted. "I'll pick you up at 7. "Okay." She was definitely blushing. "I should go. O'Shan's probably watching from the window with binoculars." "Is she really?" Brittany glanced up at her third-floor window and saw the curtain twitch. "Oh yeah, absolutely. She's going to interrogate me for the next 3 hours. Tell her I said hello. I'll tell her you're a perfect gentleman who kissed my hand and made me feel like a princess. Cinderella fantasy fulfilled. Getting there." She squeezed his hand once more, then forced herself to let go and leave the car. The rain had stopped, leaving everything wet and gleaming under the streetlights. She made it halfway to her building's entrance before turning back. Mason was still there, watching her with an expression that made her brave. "Mason? Yeah? I'm really glad I destroyed your champagne." His laugh followed her all the way inside. "So let me get this straight," O'Shan said, around a spoonful of chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream. He confessed his feelings in his expensive car during a rainstorm. "Drove you home like a gentleman, kissed your hand, and asked you on a proper date?" "Yes." Brittany was pacing their tiny apartment, too wired to sit still. Girl, O'Shan set down the ice cream. "This is literally a rom-com. You're living in a rom-com. It's not a rom-com. It's real life. And real life is complicated. Real life can be a rom-com if you let it." O'Shan patted the bed. "Sit. You're making me dizzy. Tell me everything. Don't skip details." Brittany sat, then immediately stood again. "I can't sit. I'm too in love? I'm not in love. I barely know him. But you're falling. Maybe." Brittany finally collapsed onto the bed. "Okay, yes, I'm falling. Hard. And it's terrifying because what if this doesn't work out? What if he realizes I'm too broke, or too damaged, or too—" "Stop!" O'Shan grabbed her hand. "Listen to me. You are not too anything. You're smart and kind and funny and beautiful, and if Mason Jacob can't see that, he's an idiot. He does see it. That's what scares me." Brittany pulled her knees to her chest. "He sees me, Ocean. Really sees me. Not just the maid, or the broke grad student, or the foster kid. He sees me. And he likes what he sees. And that's bad because what if I screw it up? What if I'm not enough? What if it works out?" O'Shan interrupted. "What if this is actually your chance at something real and wonderful? You're allowed to have good things, Britt. You're allowed to be happy. I don't know how," Brittany admitted quietly. "Every good thing I've ever had has been taken away. Every home, every family, every person I've tried to get close to, they all left eventually. How do I let myself care about him when I know it might end? Because the alternative is spending your whole life protecting yourself from pain and missing out on joy. Oshan's voice was gentle. Look, I get it. You've been hurt. You've learned to expect the worst because the worst kept happening. But Britt, you're not that scared kid anymore. You're a grown woman who's fought for everything she has. You're strong enough to survive if this doesn't work out. But you're also brave enough to try. Brittany felt tears prick her eyes. I've always been wise. You just usually ignore me when I try to give relationship advice. That's because your last relationship was with that actor who thought he was a method werewolf. Griffin was deeply committed to his craft. Oshan said it with a straight face, then cracked. Okay, fine. He was weird. But my point stands. You deserve this. You deserve him. And from everything you've told me, he deserves you too. He has daddy issues. Who doesn't? And an ex who called him emotionally unavailable. Again, who doesn't? But he's working on it. He's opening up to you. That's huge, Britt. Oshan scooped up more ice cream. So what are you wearing on Friday? I haven't thought about it. Liar. You've thought about nothing else since you walked in here. Brittany groaned. I don't have anything nice enough. Everything I own is either work clothes or clothes with holes in them. Then we're going shopping. Ocean. I can't afford. Thrift shopping, genius. We'll find you something perfect for under $50. I have a magic touch with vintage. Oshan's eyes gleamed. This is going to be so fun. Operation Make Mason Jacob Fall Completely in Love is officially underway. That's not, we're not, Brittany sputtered. It's just dinner. Sure it is. And I'm just a theater student, not a future Tony winner. Oshan grinned. Face it, Britt. Your life just got a whole lot more interesting. Brittany couldn't argue with that. You're smiling at your phone, Caliph observed. This is new and disturbing behavior. Mason looked up from the text message, a photo Brittany had sent of Oshan doing a dramatic pose with the caption, My roommate has decided to become your biggest fan, and found his business partner watching him with barely contained amusement. I'm allowed to smile. You are. But you usually don't. Especially not at your phone like a lovesick teenager. Caliph sipped her martini. This is about the maid. Her name is Brittany. I know her name. I also know you're taking her to dinner Friday, because you asked me to recommend a restaurant that was nice but not intimidating, and romantic but not presumptuous. Caliph's smile was sharp. You're falling for her. I barely know her. That's not a denial. Mason took a long drink of his scotch. Fine. Yes, I like her. More than I should, considering we've spent maybe 3 hours total in each other's company. Sometimes that's all it takes. Caliph leaned back, studying him. You know what I find interesting? I've known you for 8 years. We built a company together. I've seen you handle hostile takeovers and financial crises and your nightmare father with perfect composure. But this woman, this broke grad student who cleans apartments, has you completely off balance in under a week. Is that bad? It's wonderful. Caliph's expression softened in a way it rarely did. You've been going through the motions since Vivian. Working constantly, avoiding anything that might require actual emotional vulnerability. But Brittany seems to have cracked through all those walls you've built. She's different, Mason said quietly. She doesn't want anything from me. Not my money or connections or status. She just likes me, the actual me, not the version I present to the world. Have you shown her the actual you? More than I've shown anyone in years. He ran a hand through his hair. I told her about my father, about Vivienne, about feeling like I'm swimming upstream while everyone else goes with the current. Things I've never even told you. Caliph raised an eyebrow. I'm slightly offended but also impressed. She must be special. She is. She's kind and funny and smart, and she's fighting to build something meaningful despite having every disadvantage. Mason stared into his glass. She grew up in foster care. 7 different homes. No family, no support system, working 3 jobs while getting her master's degree so she can help other kids in the system. And she talks about it like it's no big deal. Like survival is just what you do. She sounds remarkable. She is. Which is why I'm terrified I'm going to screw this up. Mason met Caleth's eyes. I don't know how to do this, Kay. Dating, relationships, being vulnerable with someone. I spent 2 years with Vivian, and she called me a robot. What if Brittany realizes the same thing? What if I'm too damaged to actually be good at this? Mason. Caleth's voice was unusually gentle. You're not a robot. You're just scared. There's a difference. And the fact that you're scared means you actually care about this working out. That doesn't make it easier. It's not supposed to be easy. If it was easy, it wouldn't be worth having. She finished her martini. But for what it's worth, I think she's good for you. You've been more human this week than you've been in months. More alive. That's not something to run from. What if I hurt her? She's been hurt enough already. Then don't hurt her. Caleth made it sound simple. Be honest. Be yourself. Let her see all the messy, complicated parts of you that you usually hide. That's what relationships are, 2 people deciding that their combined mess is better than being alone. Mason laughed despite himself. That's deeply unromantic. I'm a realist, not a romance novelist. Caleth signaled for another drink. But seriously, Mason, take the chance. You deserve to be happy, and from what you've told me, so does she. When did you become a relationship expert? I've been married for 6 years. I've learned a few things. Caleth smiled. Like the fact that the best relationships are the ones that surprise you. The ones where someone completely unexpected walks into your life and changes everything. Is that what Lysandra did for you? My wife walked into my life, called me a heartless corporate automaton, and then proceeded to completely rearrange my priorities. Caleth's expression was fond. Best thing that ever happened to me. So yes, I'm qualified to tell you that falling for someone unexpected and terrifying is actually a good sign. Mason's phone buzzed with another text. This time it was Brittany. O'Shan says if you hurt me, she'll hunt you down and use her theatrical combat training on you. I told her that was unnecessary, but she's very committed to the threat. Fair warning. He showed Caleth, who laughed. I like her roommate. So do I. Mason typed back. Tell O'Shan I appreciate the warning and have no intention of hurting Brittany. But if I do, I'll accept whatever theatrical combat punishment she deems appropriate. Brittany's response was immediate. She says you're acceptably respectful of consequences and has upgraded you from suspicious rich guy to potential keeper. This is high praise. Mason smiled, that genuine smile that felt rusty from disuse but was getting easier every time Brittany was involved. There it is again, Caleth said. The smile. Get used to it, Mason. Something tells me you're going to be doing a lot more of that from now on. For once, Mason didn't argue. Wednesday, Brittany tried on 17 dresses at 3 different thrift stores before O'Shan declared her hopeless and indecisive. They're all fine, Brittany said, examining a navy blue dress with a modest neckline. Fine is not the goal. We're going for stunning or breathtaking, or at least makes him forget how to form sentences. O'Shan pulled another dress from the rack, emerald green with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt. Try this. Brittany emerged from the dressing room 5 minutes later, and O'Shan gasped. That's the one. It's too much. It's fancy. I'll look like I'm trying too hard. You look like a fairy tale princess, and Mason is going to lose his entire mind when he sees you. O'Shan circled her critically. We'll need different shoes, and maybe some accessories. But yes, this is perfect. Brittany looked at herself in the mirror and felt something unfamiliar. Confidence. The dress fit like it had been made for her, bringing out the green in her hazel eyes and making her skin glow. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she could be the kind of woman who went on dates with millionaires and didn't feel completely out of place. Her phone buzzed. How's the dress shopping going? Should I be nervous? She grinned and typed back. Very nervous. O'Shan has declared this a high-stakes fashion emergency. Good. I want you to feel beautiful. I already do. The dress is just backup. There was a pause, then. You're going to completely ruin me, aren't you? That's the plan. Thursday. Mason canceled 3 meetings because he couldn't focus. This was unacceptable. He was a professional. He ran a multi-million-dollar firm. He didn't get distracted by impending dinner dates. Except he absolutely did. You've checked your phone 42 times in the last hour, Calith said from his office doorway. This is pathetic and adorable in equal measure. I'm not checking. His phone buzzed, and he immediately grabbed it. Brittany had sent a photo of a coffee cup with terrible latte art, what might have been a heart or possibly a deformed butterfly. Barista's first day. Thought of your champagne disaster and felt better about my clumsiness. He laughed and showed Calith. See? That's supportive communication. That's flirting. And you're terrible at playing it cool. Calith walked in and sat down. Are you nervous about tomorrow? No. Maybe. Yes. Mason set down his phone. What if I bore her? My life is work and more work. I don't have interesting hobbies or fascinating stories. I'm not exciting. You built a successful ethical investment firm despite your father's opposition. You have interesting opinions on art and literature. You're kind even when you pretend not to be. Calith ticked off items on her fingers. And most importantly, she already likes you. You don't have to perform or impress. Just be yourself. Myself is awkward around people I like. Then be awkward. She's clumsy and you're awkward. It's practically a rom-com waiting to happen, Mason groaned. Why does everyone keep saying that? Because it's true. Calith stood. Now go home. Prepare for your date. Maybe practice some conversation starters that don't involve quarterly earnings reports. I know how to have normal conversations. Prove it tomorrow, Friday morning. Brittany woke up at 6 a.m., despite not having to work until the afternoon. She texted Mason, "Is it normal to be this nervous about a dinner date?" Asking for a friend. His response came quickly. "If your friend is me, then yes. I've been awake since 5 a.m. We're both ridiculous." Agreed. But at least we're ridiculous together. Brittany hugged her phone to her chest and tried not to think about how much she was already falling for this man. It didn't work. To you, watching, have you ever been this nervous about a first date? What's your go-to outfit for making a great first impression? Tell us in the comments. Mason was going to have a heart attack. That was his first thought when Brittany stepped out of her building wearing an emerald green dress that made her look like something out of a dream. Her hair was down in soft waves, and she'd done something subtle with makeup that made her eyes luminous. He'd seen beautiful women before, dated them, been photographed with them at charity galas and society events, but none of them had ever made his heart stop quite like this. "Hi," Brittany said, suddenly shy as she approached the car. "Is this too much?" O'Shan insisted. "But I can change if—" "Don't." Mason's voice came out rougher than intended. "Don't change. You look, Brittany, you're stunning." She blushed. and Mason wanted to spend the rest of his life making her do that. "You clean up pretty nice yourself." He'd agonized over his outfit for an embarrassing amount of time, finally settling on dark slacks and a charcoal button-down with no tie. Casual, but put together. Approachable, but still him. "Shall we?" He opened the car door for her, and she slid in with a grace that surprised him given her self-proclaimed clumsiness. The restaurant was a small Italian place in the West Village, intimate, without being pretentious, romantic, without being over the top. Mason had called in a favor to get a corner table, tucked away from the main dining room for privacy. "This is beautiful," Brittany said as they were seated. The candlelight caught in her hair, and Mason had to actively remind himself to breathe. "How did you find it?" "A client recommended it. He said it was where he took his wife on their first date, and they've been married 40 years. Mason felt suddenly self-conscious. "I thought that was a good sign. Very romantic of you." But Brittany was smiling that warm smile that made his chest tight. "I have to confess something, though. Should I be worried? I've never been on a date this fancy before. My last boyfriend, if you can even call him that, took me to a diner where the waitress called him by name and knew his usual. Turned out, he took all his dates there. I was apparently number 6 in a rotation." Mason's jaw tightened. "He sounds like an idiot." "Oh, he absolutely was. But in my defense, I was 21, and he had a motorcycle." She picked up her menu. "What's your dating history?" "Besides Vivienne, not as interesting as you might think. A few relationships in college, none that lasted more than a few months. Then Vivienne for 18 months. Then nothing for 2 years." He paused. "I'm not good at the casual dating thing. I tend to be all in or not at all." "That's not a bad thing." Vivienne thought it was suffocating. Vivienne didn't appreciate what she had. Brittany met his eyes over the candlelight. Her loss. The waiter arrived before Mason could respond, and they ordered Brittany choosing pasta after extensive deliberation, Mason going with his usual. When they were alone again, he found himself studying her openly. "What?" Brittany asked, self-conscious. "I'm trying to figure out how this happened." "How? What happened?" "How I went from Tuesday mornings being the worst part of my week to looking forward to them, because that's when you show up with your squeaky shoes and your terrible accents and your ability to make me laugh at myself." Brittany's cheeks flushed again. "That's actually really sweet. I'm not usually sweet. Ask anyone who knows me. They'll tell you I'm cold and calculating and emotionally unavailable. Then they don't really know you." She leaned forward. "You want to know what I think? I think you've spent so long protecting yourself that you forgot how to let people in. But you're not cold, Mason. You're careful. There's a difference. You keep saying that because it's true, and because I recognize it." She traced the rim of her water glass. "When you grow up the way I did, moving from home to home, never knowing if you'll be wanted or welcomed, you learn to be careful too. You learn not to expect good things because expecting them just makes it hurt more when they don't happen. But you still try. You're still open and warm and kind, despite everything you've been through." "I had to make a choice," Brittany said quietly. "Either let my past make me hard and closed off, or use it to become someone who understands pain and wants to prevent it in others. Some days it's harder than others. Some days I want to just build walls and never let anyone in. But then I remember that walls keep out the bad things and the good things." Mason reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were small and warm in his, and the contact sent electricity through his entire system. "Thank you." "For what?" "For taking a chance on me. For seeing past the walls I've built. For making me want to be brave enough to let them down." Brittany's eyes shimmered with emotion. "Mason, I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other, but I need you to understand something. He squeezed her hand gently. I haven't felt this alive in years, maybe ever, and it terrifies me. But I don't want it to stop. I don't want it to stop either. Her voice was barely a whisper. Even though I'm scared out of my mind, we can be scared together. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Wait until you hear my poetry. It's terrible. She laughed, and the tension broke into something lighter. Please tell me you actually write poetry. Absolutely not. I'm a numbers person. The most poetic thing I've ever written was a quarterly earnings report. And even that was pushing it. Somehow that makes me like you even more. Their food arrived, and they fell into easier conversation trading stories about work and school, discovering shared tastes in books and movies, debating the merits of various pizza toppings with the seriousness of a UN summit. Pineapple on pizza is a crime against humanity, Mason insisted. Pineapple on pizza is a misunderstood genius, Brittany countered. Sweet and savory. It's culinary innovation. It's culinary chaos. You're just afraid of joy. I'm afraid of fruit where it doesn't belong. Tomatoes are fruit. Mason opened his mouth, closed it, then laughed. Okay, you win that round. I usually do. But she was grinning. Though I have to say, watching you get passionate about pizza toppings is adorable. I'm not adorable. I'm sophisticated and intimidating. You're wearing a sauce stain on your shirt from your pasta. Mason looked down and swore. Sure enough, there was a small red splotch on his charcoal shirt. This is what I get for trying to be casual. Here. Brittany dipped her napkin in water and reached across the table. May I? He nodded, and she gently dabbed at the stain. Her face concentrated and close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and floral that made him think of summer gardens and sunshine. There, she said, sitting back. Good as new. Mostly. My hero. Someone has to rescue you from your own clumsiness. Apparently, it's contagious. After dinner, neither of them wanted the evening to end, so they walked. The West Village was quiet this time of night, just the distant sound of traffic and the occasional couple passing by. Mason had offered Brittany his jacket when she shivered, and now she was wrapped in it, drowning in expensive fabric that smelled like him. Tell me about your thesis, Mason said as they wandered down a tree-lined street. You mentioned it's about foster care? Attachment theory in foster care systems, Brittany confirmed. Basically, I'm researching how the lack of consistent caregiving affects children's ability to form secure attachments later in life. How trauma and instability create patterns that follow kids into adulthood. Sounds personnel. It is. She was quiet for a moment. I had 7 different homes. 7 different families who either couldn't handle me, or didn't want to, or just gave up. And every time I was moved, it reinforced this belief that I was fundamentally unlovable, that something was wrong with me. Mason stopped walking, turning to face her. Brittany, I know it's not rational, she continued. I know now that the system is broken, that it wasn't about me being unlovable. But that child inside me, the one who was 6 years old and didn't understand why her mom couldn't take care of her, why nobody wanted to keep her. She still believes it sometimes. Is that why you're scared? Of this? Mason gestured between them. Partly. I'm scared that you'll realize I'm too much work, too damaged, that the reality of who I am won't match up to whatever you think you see. She wrapped his jacket tighter around herself. And I'm scared that I'm going to fall completely in love with you and then you'll leave, and I'll have to add you to the list of people who didn't stay. Mason's heart cracked open. He reached out and cupped her face gently, making her look at him. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. I can't promise this will be easy. But Brittany, I need you to hear this. You are not too much. You are not damaged. You are brave and strong and absolutely remarkable, and anyone who couldn't see that was blind. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and Mason wiped them away with his thumbs. I'm falling for you too, he said quietly. Faster than I should. Harder than is probably wise. And it scares me because I've never felt this way before, not with Vivienne, not with anyone. You make me want to be better, braver, more human. Mason, let me finish. He took a breath. I know I'm not perfect. I'm emotionally repressed and work too much, and probably have more daddy issues than any therapist could reasonably handle. But with you, I feel like maybe I could actually figure out how to be the person I want to be. The person who deserves you. You already deserve me, Brittany whispered. They stood there in the golden streetlight, the city quiet around them, and Mason made a decision. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but she didn't. She rose on her toes to meet him. Their first kiss was soft and tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Brittany's lips were warm and tasted faintly of the tiramisu they'd shared. He pulled her closer, deepening the kiss, and Brittany's hands came up to tangle in his hair. She fit against him perfectly, like she'd been designed to be there, and Mason felt something in his chest click into place. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Brittany laughed shakily. Wow. Yeah. Mason rested his forehead against hers. Wow. Tss. That was significantly better than my last first kiss. Good. I'd hate to be outperformed by motorcycle guy. Trust me, you're not. She pulled back slightly to look at him. So, where do we go from here? Wherever you want, as fast or slow as you need. I want to try, Brittany said. For real. Not just casual dating. I want to see where this goes, even though it scares me. Me too. Mason kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips again, because he couldn't help himself. Fair warning. I'm going to be terrible at this sometimes. I'll probably work too much and forget to text back and struggle with vulnerability. And I'll probably be too clingy and overthink everything and have moments where I'm convinced you're going to leave. Brittany smiled. We'll be a disaster together. My favorite kind of disaster.